Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Crissy Piper, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. Hey, warriors. Welcome back to Suburban Warrior, the podcast. I am your host, Crissy Piper, and I am so very excited about our special guest today. Colleen is a professional mixed martial arts fighter. Yes, you heard me correctly. She is an MMA fighter and a survivor of domestic abuse. She is a former strawweight world champion and 2-time UFC Contender Series veteran. Jamie has blazed a trail back to herself, rebuilt her life, and is now a committed advocate for other survivors. Today, she is here to share her amazing warrior story with us. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here and for really just showing up, not only to this podcast, but for all of our listeners, because I have a very strong feeling that the story that you are going to share will touch a lot of lives for people out there. So thank you for having the courage to show up today and to do this interview and to share your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly hope to touch somebody today. So if I do, then it's a mission accomplished.
Well, listen, I already know that you've touched my life because,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know each other personally, but I can tell you just from, reading your story and following your journey, like I said, I consider myself a suburban warrior. We all have trials and tribulations that we have to get through life. We all have obstacles and challenges. And the mindset or the mantra that I use personally and that I, really encourage other people that are like-minded or like me, other moms going through stuff and having to deal with kids and family and aging parents and maybe divorce and relationships, whatever it may be at their point in their life. The Suburban Warrior mantra is a mindset and something that helps me. When I, read about you and what you've been through and what you do, I mean, you are a true warrior. Like a real warrior. You are like literally fighting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get right into it.
It's so funny because some people meet me and they're like, "You do what? What is that? What do you do? You fight? Like, why?"
Listen, I literally think I had to read your Instagram profile like 3 times because I was like, does that say MMA fighter?
Yeah.
You're like this beautiful thing, this beautiful woman. And I'm like, wow, who is she fighting? Because but then when I saw pictures of you from some of your fights, I mean, it's just amazing. So tell us your story. How did this come about? How did you get into fighting? What was your journey? Give us some of your background so we can understand.
Sure. So I am somebody who was very competitive and just sort of moved on through to sports all through like junior high and high school. And then once that was over, I was just kind of like, okay, what now? And so I found myself just kind of lifting weights and trying to make it to the gym when I could, but it just wasn't the same. I still wanted to feel that competitive drive, but not really knowing where to find it. And then after some time, a friend of mine was teaching a kickboxing class, and I never really put any thought into martial arts, never really thought it would be something that I would like. I remember growing up watching boxing with my dad from time to time, and I always appreciated it, but never like made the connection like, hey, maybe one day I could do that. So anyway, I ended up it took some convincing for me to go to this class. I just was like not really that open to it. I don't know why, but I went and never stopped training after that day. I realized I just sort of like had this awakening and realized I had a passion for martial arts and wanted to see how far I could take it. So, and at the time, women and MMA, especially the UFC, I remember Dana specifically at one point saying women will never be in the UFC. And then obviously there were some pretty badass women that broke those doors down and pushed through those barriers and sort of paved the way for the rest of us. But yeah, we just sort of had to compete where we could and get in where we could. And it was a really long road, but I think when it's just something that you believe in and when you have dreams and you're just willing to sacrifice and do what it takes, and even when it's like hard and you don't really see the outcome right away, but you know you're onto something. So that's kind of like what led me to to just continue fighting and trying to compete when I could. And then I eventually I did some boxing and kickboxing matches, and then transitioned to MMA after some time. And then yeah, from there it was kind of history. But
Okay, well, here's the thing.
yeah.
So I work out. I
Yeah.
quote unquote train. I've done my fair share of
Mhm.
kickboxing and boxing
Oh,
classes. You know,
nice.
I've had the gloves on with the bag and
Hmm.
whatever. You know, I love it. Feel like I'm a
Hmm.
badass kicking the shit out of that
You
bag.
are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. But what I need to know is where, okay, where was your mindset to take you from that class where you're like, yeah, I'm not sure if I really like this or if I'm into it, then to literally take you into the ring fighting with someone? Because that's a completely different mindset, right? I
It
mean,
really is. And that's a great question because I never really looked at it in that way. It was just, I guess I've just always been that way, like seeing something and then realizing I can do that and like I have to be the best at it. I think that's where my mindset is really with anything that I'm pursuing in my life, that I have to be the best at it. So I guess by me um wanting to be the best out of it sort of led into, competing and trying to be better than everyone. So
okay. And so at what point in your life did the domestic abuse that you experience,
mhm.
where was that along this path of becoming an MMA fighter? Was it happening
um
at the same time?
it was. So my I already had these goals and dreams in mind before I met my ex-partner. We sort of met through that community. So and then it sort of happened almost instantly. Even though I had martial arts in my life and I teaches you um, to have more confidence and love yourself and to be positive. There's like so many things I love so much about martial arts, and that the most thing being is just taking care of your heart and your spirit. And I just, I think I was just in a really tough point in my life. I think I was still trying to figure myself out. And I was, even though I somewhat had a direction, but I think overall, and I was young, I was in my early 20s. It was just sort of like, I was just very easily manipulated at that time in my life, I should say. So, um, and also too, I'm just a nurturer at heart. And in the past, I wanted to save people, and I wanted to like be the one to like pull somebody out of like a hardship or something that they're going through in their life. But um, it was just, I don't know. I learned the hard way that no matter what you do or how good you are, um, to some people, that everything they're dealing with and sometimes how they treat you is everything to do with them and not you. And but that was me. I was just constantly like a people pleaser, always trying to help people and wanted to, like I said, I just wanted to save them. So I think that's sort of what led me into being like so easily manipulated, was just having a good heart, but it was kind of used against me at the same time. So
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so can you tell us a little bit about that journey for you as far as, with the domestic violence and how you were able, you know, to overcome and get out of that situation? Because we know there's so
Sure.
many people that are in that situation and
Hmm.
experiencing, whether it's physical violence or, mental abuse. And there's just so many different forms of abuse,
Hmm.
but they're stuck and they're stuck in it. And,
Hmm.
they're trying to figure out how to become a survivor and to get out of the situation. So, while you were in it, can you give us a little insight as to how you were feeling when you were in it and what your thought process was? And then how were you able to get out of it?
Sure. So, and I'm really glad you brought up the point of that there's many different forms of domestic abuse. Some people think it is only physical, but there is the physical, then you have the mental, emotional, and even financial abuse, which was I experienced all of those things, and at an extreme level. And to be honest, in the beginning, I didn't really want to accept it. I guess I was just, I mean, just obviously not ready to. I knew that it wasn't right the way I was being treated or the lifestyle that I was living with him. It was just, but I constantly, I think, just from my childhood and not wanting to, I don't know. I think I was trying to like build something that I never had growing up, and I was willing to like it was kind of like willing to sacrifice myself for that when that's just not the
Sure.
way it should be. So I kept trying to hang on, kept trying to like um, do everything right, constantly walking on eggshells, giving up the things that made me happy. And eventually I became extremely isolated. And at the time we were living in Cincinnati, most of my family had moved from West Virginia, where I'm from, to Cincinnati. And so that's kind of where we met. And at the time I was training, I was working a couple of jobs, and I was loving it. And I had friends. I was, pretty happy. But when he came along, that quickly stopped. Like I started feeling like very guilty for doing any of those things. Eventually, I stopped working, and then eventually I stopped training, and then I got pregnant pretty early on. So then I felt like, oh God, I'm really stuck now. And so I just sort of, you know, said to myself, okay, you got to find a way to figure it out, make it work, and do what you have to do. And because now too, being pregnant with this child, it was like, now you're never going anywhere, now that you have my kid. So um, uh, yeah,
Yeah, and
shortly after it became.
that's another point that I wanted to make in your
Mhm.
introduction, which is a huge part of where you are right now, is that you're a
Mhm.
mom.
Yeah, I'm a
So, in
mama.
addition to doing all of this, you are a
Mhm.
badass mama, like for real. So thank you for bringing
Yeah,
that into it.
of
I
course.
omitted that extremely important point in the
No
introduction.
worries. No worries.
Okay, so and I do think the part
Mm.
what you said in the beginning is that you kind of just accepted it, and I think that I would assume that that's how many people feel who are going through it,
Mhm.
that it's going to change or that you can make it change and it will get
Mhm.
better, kind of
Sure.
thing.
And then there's always that cycle too of something really bad happening, and then they apologize profusely, say all the right things, and it's not, and like you said, never going to happen again, but it always happens again, and it always gets worse, unfortunately. And as much as we want to see the good in people and believe that, okay, under all of this, craziness, like there has to be like something good there, and we try so hard to fight to like bring that out in them, but it's not really our responsibility to do that, whether, I mean, in any area of our lives, like we can't control people. They're going to do what they're going to do regardless of like how we behave or how we react. So um yeah, so we ended up kind of bouncing around a little bit. He's from down south. So we ended up moving there because we were on the verge of getting evicted because he was also a fighter, but kind of refused to take on like a part-time job, which is what a lot of fighters do. It is what it is till you get to, the big stage where you're making like an income where you can just train full time. So, a lot of fighters have part-time jobs, and I think he refused to do that because he wanted to be on me at all times and just like to have that control. And so anyway, on the verge of being evicted, we moved down to close to his family. From there, he ended up partnering up with someone in Philly and to start a business. And so that's sort of what brought us here. So once we moved here, then if I didn't feel isolated before, I was even more isolated because I wasn't around any of my family or any of his family. And that was definitely hard. But I think, until my daughter, it was tough, but I just kind of had to do what I had to do, and still wasn't ready to accept the abuse for what it was. I was just in denial, I guess. And also too, I felt that now thinking about it, had I did accept it at that time, maybe, like I didn't really, okay, so I'm in this situation now. What do? I didn't have anything to fall back on. I think that's what also too keeps a lot of women or men it's in an abusive relationship, is that they don't see a way out because they don't have like an income, they don't have an education, they don't have anything to fall back on, and it's scary. And
they can't see the alternative.
Sure. And it's sort of like, so it's sometimes, I hate to say it, but it's sometimes easier to just take, just to be in it until I guess, it reaches that point where you can't. But, it was hard for a long time. And once my daughter was born, that obviously was so amazing for me. I felt like she was my little savior, and she still is. And, that was, even though we had all of, a lot of bad things happening, I just poured so much of all of my love really, and my time and effort into her. And so we had like really great things we do every day. And she's such a bright kid. So I had like a little like homeschooling system set up for her. So I was just constantly pouring into her. And it definitely shows to this day. But I always made sure we had activities to do like outside of our house, and just things that made us happy that we did together. And he was sort of like gone most of the time anyway. So that was nice for us to have that time together. But yeah, I think when you reach the point of where enough is enough, which I did, it just, things were progressively.
What made you reach that point?
Well, things were
brought you to that point?
Progressively getting worse. And I was in fear for my life almost on a daily basis, and afraid for my daughter. And it was just one of the things like this. I love her too much to do this to her. And I just wasn't, I knew in my heart, I knew I need to get out of this, but I didn't know how. And also too, like with custody and different things, you can't just pick up and leave. There's like stipulations. Right. There's like a relocation process you have to go through. So it was a breaking point of me just finally coming to the realization and saying like, I'm not going back. If I can like tell you a little story just to kind of like help bring it into perspective. So the last couple of years were very tumultuous, like just very extreme, especially on the mental and emotional side of things. And the physical, that was just always there. So but it was, and his mental health was deteriorating as well. So that made it even harder. So there was an incident that happened. I'll always remember because it was Mother's Day, and he was gone working to pay for a trip that we were all supposed to take together to Ohio for a wedding. And so while he was working, my daughter and I, we were having a picnic at a park and just having the best time. And I remember getting this phone call, and he was just going in on me and just saying the nastiest things you could possibly say to someone. And I honestly was like, in the past, I would find myself just apologizing for shit that for things that that I didn't do.
Say what you want to say, girl.
Okay,
let it out.
Cool. So apologizing for shit that I didn't do, just to end the argument, just to somehow like make it stop. And I wasn't willing to do that this time, but I was responding in a way that I was just sort of not giving him what he wanted, but I also wasn't emotional at all. I was just kind of like, okay, that's how you feel. Okay. I'm sorry you feel that way, sort of thing. And he didn't like that. But I realized something in me was like, you have to find a way out. So I ended up calling my mom and explaining to her what had been going on, because she was under the impression that things were getting better. And I had explained to her that they were actually getting worse. And she said, well, let's do this. Why don't you guys, my daughter and I, come down now, and then when he started to come, he'll, come down, you guys do the wedding, and then try to figure things out from there. She's like, but it sounds like you just really need to decompress and be with your family. And she was right. So I didn't tell him that I was leaving until we were on the train, actually on the train leaving the city, because I knew he would find a way to come down and keep us there and not let us leave. So, so that's pretty much what it was. I just packed a bag for, the 4 days we would be there. And I was instantly met with constant messages of saying I kidnapped my kid, and that I'm, horrible parent, anything like awful you could say to somebody, he was saying to me. And I got to a point where, because I just had a little flip phone. Every phone I've ever had has been smashed or broken in some way. So, but at this time I had gotten a little, my mom had sent me money, so I had a little flip phone, and I was getting messages through that. And I started to screenshot them on an old phone that Selena would use for games, because I was like, there's no way anybody's going to believe me if I don't have something to back up what I'm saying, because obviously this is going to end up in family court. So, and he was saying he was going to file all these papers against me. And I mean, I had thousands upon thousands of messages from him. Our train ride was 17 hours, and probably every minute my phone was receiving messages. And,
Wow.
but I sort of went into like this, like mode of like, I was keeping my composure, mostly for my daughter, but also too, I didn't want to completely just I didn't want to lose it, because if I did, it would just honestly make it harder for us to get through. Like, my daughter needed me to be strong, and I needed that for myself too, if I was going to make it. So, we get there, and it just ended up being exactly how I thought. And we ended up being, he filed lots of papers, and anybody can file paperwork, but in order to get a hearing, like an emergency hearing granted, at least in PA, you have to prove that the child is in danger. So he said a lot of things that weren't true to get the judge to grant it. And so there was stuff like that. And I think a lot of people too don't realize that there's abuse. A lot of abusers will use the court system to abuse their partners as well. So that was an ongoing 4-year thing for us. So, but once we had our initial court hearing, one thing led to another, and we ended up homeless. He ended up throwing away all of my belongings. The only thing I had left was what I went to Ohio with, which was basically nothing. And yes, we just, it honestly just felt like it was never going to end. It was just one thing after another, while trying to find a place for us to live. And it was just really, really hard. But for whatever the reason, nobody told me this is how you should be acting. This is how you should handle the situation. There was just something in me, something in my spirit that allowed me to push through, and knowing that there's going to be something better on the other side of what we're going through. And I felt that keeping a positive mindset, even if things were just absolutely shit, I was like, oh, but I would always just find something to be grateful for, find something that maybe just the fact that I was alive and that we survived, you know, a lot of things that, I mean, I probably shouldn't have. I had a lot of people in family court tell me that there was something that had happened, and he was out of his mind, and we ended up having to, well, I don't want to like get ahead of myself here, but or if I feel like I'm jumping around too much, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. But there was an instance that happened. This was before the initial, this was actually a year prior to us like being homeless and different things. So when I knew it was getting really bad, he initially had like told me to get out. He didn't want us at our house anymore. And so my sister, I told her how afraid I was. I called her, and she and her boyfriend came up, and I guess he didn't realize that they actually would come up. And but that ended up turning into him taking our daughter and leading me to believe that he was in another state, like going close to his family. And so I just kind of like pulled up my bootstraps and just did what everybody told me to do. Like every person I encountered that day, like I didn't know where my daughter was, and I knew he was under the influence, and I was really afraid for her. But at the same time, I just kept my composure. I went like each step and each person, I just did what they told me to do, and it ended up working. It helped us. So we ended up going to the last person we encountered that day, which was a full day of being at family court, trying to find answers. Like, he's under the influence. He's driving with my kid. Like, this can't be right. This isn't right.
Scary.
Somebody help. And so we ended up at a police station, and there was a woman there, and she was an advocate. So she understood what we were going through. And she said, so we did what they call a safety plan. So she kind of laid it out for me. This is what we're going to do. We're going to call him, and I'm going to talk you through what you need to say. We're going to find out where they are, if they're actually they're probably still in Philly. That was her thought. And she said, then we're going to get your baby home. And so my sister's boyfriend was a truck driver at the time. So he had and like a burner phone. I believe all truck drivers have this. So they told me to take the phone. Which, by the way, we did realize that they were still in Philly, and he agreed to bring her back on the condition if my sister left. So they gave me the phone. The plan was for me to hide the phone somewhere, and if at any point I felt like I was in danger, to call, let the phone ring two or three times, then hang it up, and that way they would know to come help us. And so we were at the apartment. He finally showed up, and I'm only going to get into detail with this because it was just so eerie and very scary. And I feel like had I not taken action, something definitely would have happened, at least to me, if not my daughter. So we were in the living room, and he was sitting next to me reading out of a book, like a C.S. Lewis book. It was just very bizarre, as if nothing ever happened. And I felt I was very afraid. And my daughter was on the floor playing. He goes to the bathroom, and I hear him on the phone saying he had a gun. He wasn't going to let anyone take her away from him. And so I realized that something's got to give. So I didn't have enough time at that time to make the call, because he came back pretty quickly from the restroom. And so we, again, he's continuing to read, and I'm just praying that he goes back to the restroom, which he did. And as he was walking there, I pulled the phone, and just to give myself this couple extra seconds, and made the call, hung it up, hid the phone. And at that point, I took my daughter close to where the entrance of our apartment is. And that way, when they came, we could just haul ass out the door. And that's exactly what happened. It literally felt like 30 seconds before they were there, and before as soon as I heard them bang on the door. And I always cry in this part. but I just feel like it's just so important to share. So as we're coming out of the entrance of the apartment building, the police are like at the door and they are like telling him to put his hands up to stop because he was chasing us. And so, yeah, I always felt as a kid, felt like we were just like like the moment I stepped out of the building, I felt like we were just carried out on a cloud. It was just like how safe I finally felt in that moment. And there was literally we lived like at the time was on like a little side street of a yeah, like a little side street. And I mean, from one end to the other, there were like detectives and police cars. And it makes me wonder, like, were they already there? No, I don't know. Anyway, because it just happened so fast. And so, anyway, yeah, I just like to tell people that because it's just when you really don't wait, when you we have that intuition for a reason. We have that gut feeling for a reason. And I think that it's so important to listen to that, especially in times like these. So yeah, I just, that story just, really.
Wow, that is intense. And I have to tell you, I was like on the edge of my seat listening to it because I was just wanted to know what the outcome was. But I thank you so much for sharing it because I agree and couldn't feel stronger about the fact that, you have to listen to your voice and your intuition and the fact that you took action in that moment. And I can't even imagine what that felt like for you. And I can't imagine, like you said, it maybe felt like 30 seconds. I'm sure time was irrelevant in that moment. And for all of the, hormones, the adrenaline and everything that you had going through your body at the time, because you were literally in survival mode for you and your daughter, and to get both of you to safety. And I can't even imagine what that felt like. And, thank you for sharing that story because,
of course.
That's where so many people are, that maybe they're not taking action. They're feeling like they're in danger. They're not in a safe environment and they're feeling stuck. And you just have to reach out to resources like you did, whether it's family or, like you said, this woman at the police department was able to, because she was an advocate and could walk you through a safety plan. It's just amazing. Like each step of the way, if you take action, the resources will be there for you. They will come,
absolutely,
even if you don't feel like they will.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's so brave of you.
So important. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I learned about women against abuse like shortly after. So that happened a year before the whole incident that sort of led us to the path of women against abuse. So once everything had happened and I was finally accepted into one of their safe havens, which isn't an easy task. I mean, I was persistent. So when I first learned about them, I had a list of resources and I just went down the list, every single one, and wouldn't take no for an answer. I was really persistent, and I was that annoying woman that would show up every single day. I really need help. And I'll be honest with you, there are some people who, I mean, not to say they don't need the help, but unfortunately they have to turn away a lot of people. I'll just put it that way. Because there's just not enough space, and the resources are there, but sometimes they're not always available. So, but you'll never know unless you try. So that was me. I was just like, no, you're going to help me. Like that was my whole mindset through that. And eventually I started, again, each step I would reach the right person or the right resource, and that would set me up for the next one. And so I would just kind of gain momentum through that and start to see a little bit of like light at the end of the tunnel, although it was a very long, scary, dark tunnel. I started to see like a little bit of light at the end, and I just kept my daughter in mind and just like, we have to get out of this. Like, and honestly, the way that being at the safe haven, I remember walking in and I just had a complete breakdown. But I also felt like the biggest weight lifted off my shoulders, because for me, I looked at it as a new a chance to sort of like take my life back. This was my opportunity to be in a safe place, have that like security that we're going to have food, we have a place to sleep. You know, we have what we need. And now all I have to do is focus on rebuilding my life and doing it on my terms and on my daughter's terms. And it was just, that's all I did. That was where all of my focus went was, but for whatever reason, I was able to like sort of break things down into sections. I'm not really sure. It wasn't something I learned how to do again, which is kind of weird. I feel like I just had this like really amazing like aura or something that was really guiding me through this whole process, that there were things that I was doing that people like pay money to be taught. Like I'm just kind of like, but I didn't realize it at the time. I just was doing what I thought was the right thing to do. And so, but yeah, I was able to just break things down in sections so that I wasn't looking at everything as a whole and getting overwhelmed and then just falling apart. So I tried to keep like different things separate, like our custody battle and, you know, support, all that stuff, family court business. I would just keep in one area of my mind. And then I would focus on myself and rediscovering myself and just trying to like rebuild my confidence and falling in love with the person who I was before him. And I knew she was still there. We just got buried a little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, you know, and then on top of all of it, it was like, it took me a while, but I had to find forgiveness and forgive him for putting us in, you know, for putting us through all of it really, because I didn't want to carry around, any of that negativity.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hold on to anger or the resentment or the pain and hurt. Like, I mean, I know now, like when I tell my story, I mean, I'm just a crier anyway, but I cry because when I share, because I'm just honestly just overcome. Like I'm really moved by my own story sometimes and just really proud of my daughter and her resilience and just how we really handled the whole thing and who we've become because of it. So I cry because I'm like really proud of myself. And but yeah, I
As you
did
should be. You should be so proud of
yeah.
yourself because I mean, it is such a journey. And like you said, it's years. And, you know, the emotions come up because it's, you know, I'm sure you don't cry because of just sadness. It's just the emotions that are coming up
Right.
because of everything that you've been through in this journey. And you are, like you said, it was this long, dark tunnel that I would assume now feel that you're at the end of, and the light that's there for you at the end of that tunnel is giving you your purpose now, you know, to be an advocate for other survivors and to help other women. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, what are you doing now? I know you're rebuilding your life, which I'm sure is no easy task and takes a lot of daily habits and mindfulness training, and you know, like you said, giving up the resentment and forgiving. Like all of that takes work, and it takes hard work to have that positive mindset. So what is the work that you're doing now, and how does that fuel you to, you know, pursue your passion?
Sure. So I think it all started with actually while I was in the safe haven, and this I actually I forced myself to start training again. And honestly, there were more days than that I didn't want to do it than I actually did. I was like, I got to do this. I have to just pursue my passions and do what I love. Even if I didn't compete again, I just wanted to, I wanted martial arts in my life again. So, once I started training and feeling just the support from my teammates and my coaches and all the people around me who all shared like the same vision and same positive outlooks, and it was pretty amazing. So I thought to myself, why can't I do that? Bring something like that to the safe haven? Maybe start a self-defense class, and maybe do some fitness stuff, and just to bring, like, help the women there feel empowered to feel what I was feeling, which was what got me out of bed on most days. And I just knew I always wanted to start something like that once I was in a good place in my what I like to call my healing journey. And I wanted to make sure I was in a good place because I needed to be able to give them my whole heart if I was going to do something like that. So I needed to be all in. So it took a couple of years once we were finally transitioned out and back on our feet. And I went to Women Against Abuse and gave them my ideas, and they were so excited about it. But that's pretty much what started my journey with them and partnering up and working for them now. So I did the classes for about a year and a half, and I had a partner who came with me, who volunteered her time every week, which was amazing. And she was sort of on kid duty. She would have activities and different things set up for them so that the women there could just totally power through without any distractions and just have that time for self-care, and which is what we all know is so important, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And so that was such an incredibly fulfilling part of my life and my journey and road to recovery. And it was just so amazing to see these women's lives like transformed, even just from 1 hour a week. And
yeah.
So, but through that, they started gradually asking me to speak more and more at their functions, and I now am an expert speaker at the trainings that they do for new volunteers and staff members. So I speak at those every six weeks or so, which is pretty amazing. And then, but through that, then I sort of gain more exposure, and then other people start asking me to share and to speak. So I do a lot of speaking, and which is
That's
something
great.
I thought I would never do because I am deathly afraid of public speaking. So I thought, and but I love it. I'm doing that, and obviously still fighting, but currently taking a little break from competing so I can focus more on community work and being an advocate and helping women through fitness and health and all that good stuff. So,
okay. So I'm dying to ask because, okay. Well, I think that's just wonderful and really so impressive, the impact that you're making on all these women's lives, and how you're, sharing your story and using your situation for good now. It's really pretty amazing.
And not to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I just have to say this so I don't forget. That's one thing I always preach to my daughter is that, and we've always been very open. We've gone through extensive therapy together, and our house, like our little bubble, we know it's a safe place, and she can always be open with me. And that's one of the things I always preach to her about, is how we always, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. You were saying open.
How even though we've gone through like a bad situation, it's important to always try to turn it around and use it as something good. So I just wanted to share that in there.
And that's why it's amazing that you're doing this, because we all have bad situations, right? We all go through terrible things in life. And the most important thing is not only learning how to come out of that situation, but using it for the better, and to not only better your own life, but to better everyone else's life and help them, through this journey as well. But I have to ask about the fighting, because we talked a lot about, your journey through domestic abuse. And I think that is obviously very extremely important to share. But like the fighting, okay, I can't even imagine getting in the ring and because it's not just like fighting. It is like crazy fighting. It is mixed martial arts. Like the first time I just need to know, the first time you got in the ring with someone else, like was going through your head? Were you like, holy shit? Or were you just so badass and you just kicked the shit out of
I
it?
mean, you know what? When I always tell people, so the walk to the cage, I've since learned how to like switch my mindset in that. But like in the beginning, my first fight, I was walking into the cage and I'm like, what am I doing? Who does this? Am I
Yeah,
crazy?
yeah.
I'm like having this whole conversation in my mind where I'm trying to like hold a straight face. I'm just thinking to myself, what the hell am I about to do? Right? Like, who does this? And then once they close the cage door and they lock it, then that's it. Like, there's nowhere to
That's
go. You have to
it.
just say, we're doing this, and
Here
then
we
just do
go.
it. It's like, it's what we train to do. So that initial,
Yeah.
like, once the bell rings, then believe it or not, that's kind of like the switch to like, oh, like I'm in my element. I know what I'm doing
Yeah.
here. So yeah.
It's literally a mindset switch, right? I mean, talk
Yeah.
about mental strength and mindset. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
is really such a crazy example, though, of how you just train. And it's not just
Mm-hmm.
your physical strength. It's got to be like
Oh,
85% mental.
absolutely. And you know what? I went on a whole nother journey of learning about mindset because I went through a little bit of a mental barrier for like, it was like back to back fights. I was just, I don't know if it had something to do with my ACL reconstruction and just, I don't know, something was off and I couldn't figure out what it was. And my boyfriend's like, you need to talk to someone. Like, I don't like seeing you like this. Figure it out. Like, let's get through it. So I wasn't really interested in trying to find someone. I was just thinking like then that felt forced to me. So one day this guy just random person messaged me on Instagram. He's like, have you ever thought of hypnosis? And I'm like, who the hell is this? And what kind of introduction is that? And like I was so negative about it.
Yeah,
And and so I just started sort of scrolling through his page and saw who he had worked with previously. And I thought, well, I always like I'll take a call and see what's up. And it was just a very organic connection, and he was amazing. And so he's a hypnotist and mindset coach. And I ended up hiring him for my last training camp. And let me tell you, the stuff I learned from him was just so amazing. And it carries over into my personal life as well. And it's just
absolutely.
being so in tune with my like subconscious self and
Mm.
understanding like I got to a point where like my subconscious state would automatically like deflect like negativity. It wasn't even something I had to think about anymore. Like, and mostly about like myself. There was always like that
Yes.
that good voice and that bad voice. But after a while, it was just like my inner self was sort of taking care of that for me. So I didn't even really like have to struggle with that anymore. But I walked into that fight a completely different fighter person, and it was just such a huge milestone for me in my career. So because now I have the tools, now I know what I need to do to make
Yeah.
sure I keep myself I keep myself from regressing. And so yeah, I'm super thankful that he just randomly reached out like a weirdo. And
Well,
yeah,
I think that's the
sorry,
universe
Rich.
intervening right
Yeah,
there. That's divine intervention.
yeah, for
That's how it's
sure.
meant to be. And not, sometimes,
Mhm.
when you have to respond to those messages,
Yeah.
and like you said, if it didn't go any further and it didn't feel organic, then you wouldn't have pursued it. But,
Mhm.
like you said, now you have the tools, and that is what I stress so much. I really think that when you put in the work and you learn what you can do to actively, switch your mindset on a daily
Mhm.
basis to get yourself to a place where it's really your default. It's
Right.
not something you have to work for all the time. I mean, you have to put in a little work to get there, but it becomes your default way of thinking. And
Right.
when you are able to do that, it really does change your life. And it's in every
It does.
situation. It's in,
Mhm.
a situation, whether it's, a business you want to start, or you're a working mom and you're just trying to
Mhm.
you're a stay at home mom and you're just trying to get through the day, or if you're truly going through something traumatic, like domestic abuse or
Mhm.
something like that. And you need the mindset and the mental strength in order to
Absolutely.
get through it. And I think that
Yeah.
you are such an amazing example of that.
Oh, thank you so much. And if I could tell anybody, it would be, to really just shift your perspective just a little bit each day, and to have a positive outlook and be easy on yourself. You have to give yourself more credit because you're trying. And, you just have to like convince, I shouldn't say convince, but I mean, you just have to like tell yourself every day. There's like a lot of self-talk involved. Like, it's definitely not easy. It does take work, but, after a while, you learn to shift your perspective and start looking at, failures or setbacks or hardships as an opportunity to grow, because that's where we grow the most, is when we make those mistakes. That's how we learn and move forward, and, get to the next level next time. But, yeah, I think like failures are like a beautiful thing, really. And it took me a while to figure that out, but yeah, it's just part of the process. It's what builds your character. It's what makes you you. And then I think too, once you do finally reach that goal through all your failures, then it makes it that much more rewarding, because you know what you had to go through to get there, So, but if it was easy, then it would be like you wouldn't care. You wouldn't appreciate it. So
that's right. Failure is growth. It absolutely is.
Really
and that is wonderful advice to end on, because I think that you certainly, after everything that you've been through, you've taken that situation and you have the growth mindset from it, and you are sharing all of your amazing gifts with the world. So thank you for your vulnerability, for your courage, for sharing your story, for being a badass. I mean, so
you're a bad one too. You are.
Well, believe me, I think I am. And then I see your Instagram. I'm like, oh man, that's the definition of a badass right there. So, okay. So tell everyone where they can find you.
Most likely, Facebook. Okay. Colleen, or
awesome.
My Instagram, which is where it's the easiest way to connect with me. So it's at Bad Mama, but it's BAD_MMAMA.
Yeah,
So
and I'll make sure I have that link in the show notes so everyone can click on it and follow you, and then you guys can all see what a bad mama she is. And thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing.
Me. Thank you so much.
I think you're incredible. I feel really blessed and grateful to have met you and connected with you. And I encourage all my listeners to check you out as well. And don't forget, you can follow me at Suburban Warrior. You can find me at CrissyPiper.com. Woo woo. And, listen, if you loved listening to this episode, please make sure to tag us, subscribe, rate, and review. We would love to hear your feedback. And if you're going through something similar that, Jamie went through, we want to encourage anyone who is going through, to really abuse of any kind, to take the steps necessary to get yourself to a better place, because you are worth it. So thank you so much, Jamie.
Beautiful.
I really loved having you on today.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.